Well, now that the tedious task of talking about all those boring old cards we've already played with is over, we can finally get to the real reason why we play these games, to talk about the future. Okay, I'm mostly joking, but seriously, half the reason I play these games is because it's just so cool to always have something new and exciting to look forward to. It's like my birthday every single time they release a new article, and it just never gets old being so excited about what's coming next. Plus, I never had a chance to do any X-Men coverage on this channel anyway, so now is a perfect excuse to go through everything that they have released so far. Now, I do want to make a quick plug. When Mutant Genesis was first announced, I did get to do a preview with Nelson the Living Card Gamer over on his channel while we were at Con of Heroes, no less. So that was a really good time. So if you haven't seen that, I'll link to it in the description below. But chances are, if you're following my channel, you're following the Living Card Gamer. So you might have already seen it, but I'll put it down there anyway. And if you aren't following him, you absolutely should. His stuff is awesome, and he's a super cool dude. So we're going to go through the Mutant Genesis campaign box, what they've officially revealed in the articles. Now, there just was recently a playthrough that they did on the Fantasy Flight Games YouTube channel, and I think there were a lot more cards spoiled from that. But I'm just going to go through the official spoilers that came through the preview articles. I usually don't watch all the extra spoilers that find their way onto the internet. I like knowing a few of the cards that are going to be in the packs, you know, the ones they show us on purpose. And then after that, I try not to look at what else comes after, because I like to have some surprises when I open the packs. And so if you're the same as me, you won't see anything spoiled that you probably haven't already seen. But if you want to see more, I think there's a lot more out there. I'll leave that to you to find. So we have the Mutant Genesis is the next campaign box. And as always, it comes with 2 heroes and 5 villains, as we've become accustomed to. And I thought it was a really interesting and good choice of the heroes that they put in the box. You know, they seem to have a pattern where they never put the most popular heroes from a particular group in the box. They pick good ones for sure, but they like to save the heavy hitters for the hero packs. You know, my prediction was certainly that we would get Cyclops and Jean Grey in the box, because that just made the most sense from an X-Men perspective. But we know they are coming as separate packs. Now, they are coming out on the same day as the box, so in a way they might as well be in here. But instead, we got Colossus and Kitty Pryde, which is certainly a good secondary choice. You know, there are a lot of iconic X-Men couples, and that is one of them. So they're very popular characters in their own right, and they look absolutely fantastic as heroes. So let's go through these. We see here with Colossus's alter ego that you get to start by searching your deck for a copy of a card called Organic Steel that we'll talk about in a second, and add it to your hand. It's always nice to have one of those. So he basically starts with a 7 hand size. And the way it says for a copy makes me think that there's hopefully 2 of them in the deck. So that'll be nice. And his alter ego ability is when you change to that form, you get to shuffle one of his cards back in the deck. You know, we've seen that alter ego on a couple people now, but I still always just really appreciate that ability. It's simple. You don't have to exhaust your hero. It's nice. You can just flip down and get a benefit. So that's good. And then he has a 4 recovery, and he has 14 hit points. And now that we've seen the cards from SBDR, we know that 14 hit points is a magic number, because he'll be able to use things like Limitless Stamina and the one that gives him Steady. So that will be good for him as well. And then in his hero form, he has 1 thwart, 2 attack, 2 defense. It's always sad to see 1 thwart on a hero, but it is what it is. And his whole gimmick is that he can have 1 additional tough status card, so he can have 2 toughs. And when he changes into his Colossus form, he gets a free tough. So just every time you flip up from your alter ego, you're going to be given a tough status card, which is just awesome. And you might think, well, that's pretty cool, because then he'll just have a good couple turns of defense. But you're going to be able to use those tough statuses in interesting ways that we have not seen before. So let's take a look at the Organic Steel upgrade that you're going to get to start with in your hand. It's a 2 cost, has 2 counters on it. And then after you lose a tough status card, you get to exhaust it and give him 1 back. So you're going to get 1 for flipping up. You're going to have this in your hand, so you'll put this down on your first turn most likely. And then you're going to have at least 3 toughs right out of the gate. And then there's other ways to get more. So that's going to be really fun. He has a 0 cost event, Made of Rage. It's a superpower. It looks like all the mutant power cards are all going to be superpowers. So obviously Deft Focus is going to be a must-have in probably every X-Men deck, and I wouldn't be surprised a bit if they make some sort of new reprint with some X-Men art. Made of Rage is a 0 cost event. It says when you make a basic attack, you discard a tough status card. So here's one of the other ways that you might use your toughs. And you get +6 for that attack and overkill. So for 0, you are getting 6 extra damage and an overkill. Now you do have to attack to use this, so it is limited somewhat in that way. but for 0, giving you +6 and overkill, and you're probably going to attack anyway, I think that's a perfectly acceptable trade. He has the Steel Fist event, 2 cost. It is another attack, deal 5 damage to an enemy, and then you can discard a tough status to stun and confuse that enemy. Just love seeing stun and confuse in these hero kits. It's so nice having this stuff built in, especially the confuse, because it's just really, really nice to get to alter ego. And that some will be nice too, because that's just one less tough he'll have to waste on an enemy defense. You know, the enemy's not going to attack, so he can just hold on to a tough. And then he has the 2 cost upgrade Iron Will, gives him +1 thwart, so now he's thwarting for 2. That's nice. And more importantly, though, after a tough status is discarded from him, you get to draw a card. I think this is going to be a very, very key card in his kit. You're going to want to see this early. Similar to how with Drax, you desperately want that Dweethite Mastery that lets you draw every time you attack. You're going to want this because you're going to be discarding toughs left and right. And there's no limit here. You don't have to exhaust it. He just gets to draw a card every time you lose a tough. And I don't think I mentioned it yet, but he only has a 4 hand size. In his hero form, you know, all these big bruisers always seem to have 4 hand sizes, and anything that makes it easier to draw cards is going to be nice, and that's going to be a huge card for him. We have Bulletproof Protector, is a 0 cost event. Discard a tough status card to choose to either get 2 tough status cards, so basically you get a free tough back, or you can ready your hero, so that's just a nice simple card that will give you a couple choices. I really, really appreciate, by the way, his cost curve on the cards we've seen. Nothing costs more than 2, and he's got quite a few cards that cost 0. That's another thing that's nice about a 4 hand size hero. Looks like he'll still be able to play his cards pretty easily. We've got a couple more from him that they've shown us. Titanium Muscles is a 2 cost upgrade, so this will give him +1 attack, so then he'll be punching for 3. And this one allows you to exhaust it to generate a punch resource for each tough status card on Colossus. This is just brilliant design. You know, you're going to get probably 1 resource, possibly 2, out of this card. And I just love that these ones that give you plus to your thwart and plus to your attack also do something else interesting besides just that. You know, I've always thought in all these games, and this is how it is, but cards that just bump your stats, they're kind of boring. They're useful and you like to see them, but you know, it's not that exciting. Like all of Quicksilver's upgrades that just increase his stats, super helpful, but not that exciting. I love that these cards, they increase your stats and they do a useful thing. That's just very cool. But this is going to be super helpful. Again, the 4 hand size, anything is going to give you extra cards and extra resources. These cards are just huge. I think he's going to be so much fun. I'm really looking forward to him. And the last one we've seen from Colossus here is 0 cost event Armor Up. It's an alter ego interrupt, and it says when the villain activates, change to hero form. I think this card is brilliant because the main reason heroes can't go to alter ego is because of the villain scheming. And so what this allows you to do is flip down, and as long as you happen to draw it or kept it from the previous turn, as soon as the villain goes to scheme, you can just play this and go right back to your hero form, and he's going to attack you instead. You're going to have a tough status from flipping back into your hero form. So you get the benefits of going to alter ego, you know, any other upgrades and supports you might have in play that work on them. You get to shuffle a card back in with your Colossus alter ego ability. You're going to get to draw a bigger hand size. You get all those benefits. And then you don't even have to fear the villain scheming. It's card number 14. We haven't seen card 15, at least not officially. So if we have, I haven't seen it. So I'm really hoping there's 2 copies of this in his deck. That would be really, really nice. I always love any card that allows you to change forms in interesting ways, like to go to alter ego and come back or something like that. Those cards are always just so neat to me. So I love the way they played into that. And obviously the art is just so neat how you see him. He's in his regular form. He was chilling at the mansion, hanging out with some of the newbies. And then Sabretooth shows up and he's already, you know, halfway back into his steel form. It's just awesome. I'm so excited for this X-Men stuff. You know, I really just jumped into this whole thing. I was so excited to talk about these cards, and I didn't talk about me personally being a huge X-Men fan. You know, Marvel really feels split into almost 2 universes to me. There's the whole X-Men universe, and then there's the rest of Marvel, and I love it all. The X-Men are definitely my favorite half of the Marvel universe. I've read a lot more X-Men than I have of any other Marvel characters, so I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and so far I've been incredibly pleased with everything we've seen. All right, now they showed us some of his deck building cards. He's coming in protection, surprise, surprise. We get the 3 cost protection ally Polaris, really cool to see her, cool character. 1 thwart, 2 attack with 3 health, and her response is after she enters play, you get to give an X-Men character a tough status card. I love that you don't have to be an X-Men to play these cards, and I don't think we've seen any of the allies require you to be an X-Men. You know, it's been a real thing recently where you have to be a Guardian to play most of the Guardian allies. Web Warrior Champion, same thing. They really play well together, but the X-Men just feel bigger than that. they've definitely crossed over a lot more, and these are just so many iconic characters. They don't need to be limited to X-Men, but the bonuses still apply mostly to X-Men characters. So I prefer that instead, that you can play them in any deck. You know, Polaris can be played in any deck, and even if you're not playing an X-Men hero or any other X-Men character, she could simply give herself the tough status card, and you would still get benefit from that. So really like the design and the direction that these allies seem to be going. And I couldn't be more excited for the next one. Professor X, a 3-cost basic ally with 3 thwart, 0 attack, and 3 health. And his ability is that after he enters play, you get to choose one, confuse the villain, stun a minion, or ready an X-Men character. And then at the end of the round, if he's still in play, discard him. But for me, he might as well just say, confuse the villain, because that's pretty much what I'm going to be using him for. I talk all the time about how much I love going to Alter Ego and how hard it is to confuse the villain. And finally, we have a card that can go in every single deck in the game. Every single hero can use this. Every single hero can have at least one confuse in their deck. This is huge. This card changes the game. This card makes heroes like Wasp and War Machine and any other hero that doesn't have confuse built into their kit but likes to go to Alter Ego a fighting chance in solo. It's just incredible what this card is going to do. And in leadership, where you can recycle, it's going to be nuts. He's going to be amazing in Wasp. I'm a huge fan of Wasp, and he's got the mental icon here. I think it just elevates her deck so much, and it's in every single aspect because he's basic. Now, the argument could be made that that's a bad thing, that he's too good, he's too useful, he's going to be in every deck. But every card game has staples. Every card game has cards that you rely on to make the game go. I think that's totally fine. So it doesn't bother me, but I think you're going to be seeing a lot of Professor X, and you certainly will in pretty much every deck I build. He is going to be amazing, and I could not be more excited. Now, his other abilities could be useful. Stun a minion, unlikely. But readying an X-Men character, you could certainly make some use of that as well. You know, if the villain's already confused, or if you don't care about going to Alter Ego. So he's not limited to that, but I think similar to how Nick Fury, most of the time you probably draw the 3 cards. Here, you're probably going to confuse the villain, and then he sticks around and takes a hit for you, which honestly is kind of sad. I hate to see Professor X take a hit, but it is what it is. That's what you're going to do with him. It's just incredible. When I saw this card, I could not have been more thrilled. Here we get a reprint of Perseverance with some X-Men art. We're seeing a lot of that, where we're getting X-Men versions of similar cards. That's totally fine. It's nice to have the theme, of the art match the characters. Then we see a really cool 2-cost protection event. Powerful Punch. It is attack and defense traded. It's a hero interrupt. When an enemy initiates an attack, deal 4 damage to that enemy. This card is amazing. Protection really struggles to take out minions, and this is such a useful card. Now, the protection flavor on it's kind of funny, where they have to be attacking you first, which means you're either going to want to draw into this card, or you might have to carry it over from the previous turn. So it is somewhat limited in that way. But the fact that it does 4 damage for 2, and if it is against a minion, and you knock it out, you don't even take damage from it. And the fact that it's defense traded means it'll trigger all of your defense abilities like Unflappable, Hard to Ignore, those sorts of things if you don't take damage. So this is an excellent card that's going to see a lot of play in protection, I think. Now, we finally get some X-Men flavor. When these were coming out, I had this idea in my mind that they were going to do something that really set the X-Men apart from the other heroes. Like I said, I feel like Marvel's divided into sort of 2 universes. The X-Men are really doing their own thing most of the time. And so I kind of was hoping the heroes would have that, where there would just be some kind of new keyword or something that only the mutants could do. And I don't think that's really happened. And that's, I'm over it now. But we are seeing really cool cards that, only the X-Men can use, and they only work with X-Men. So, we've seen that with the other traits, but still, at least it sets them apart in that way. And this is one of the coolest ones we've seen. Mutant Protectors, 1-cost event. You have to be an X-Men to play it. And when an enemy attacks, you put an X-Men ally into play from your hand, exhaust it, and declare it as the defender. So you could drop Polaris into play, for example. Obviously, the combo is right here. She's going to come into play. You could give her the tough status if you wanted to, that she generates. And then she just takes a hit for you for 1. And then she stays in play. Unlike Sneak Attack, where you put the ally into play and then it leaves at the end of the phase, this is an actual way to cheat an ally into play for 1. And then they're going to stick around now, provided they survive the attack. Depending on what ally you pop in, again, Polaris, and there's other ones as well that, could likely survive the attack. And it's when an enemy attacks, so it could just be a minion, and then you could just use this to drop an ally into play. Now, you are paying 1 for this, the card itself, and the ally, so it's not as much of a discount as it looks like, unless it's at least a 4-cost ally. But it's still such a cool card. I don't want to get too wrapped up in the numbers. And then the last one we see here for Colossus, a 1-cost upgrade, Protective Training. It says attached to an X-Men ally, its training traded. You can only put one training upgrade per ally, and the ally gets +3 hit points. So this is awesome for a couple reasons. One, we're seeing some ally upgrades outside of leadership and aggression. We haven't really seen any or much of that. And two, it's so clear that the designers are big X-Men fans and understand what they're all about. You know, I've heard Caleb Gray speak multiple times about how he's a huge X-Men fan and he really wanted to get him into the game. And I think it shows because the X-Men are always training in the Danger Room and they're always trying to get better and they're always working together as a team. And I think these training cards, while they're just upgrades that, you know, increase an ally's effectiveness to some degree, I still love that they really wanted to go out of their way to make sure that the training portion of being X-Men, especially in the older X-Men stories, every time you read every comic book at one point or another, they were going to be in the Danger Room. You know, that's just a big part of their history and who they are. And so I'm glad that that's represented in the game. And it's pretty heavily supported. There's one in every aspect I believe we've seen, and there's a card that works with them as well, a really good support that we'll see in a little bit. So it's a pretty big part of who the X-Men are that you're going to be wanting to upgrade the allies. So I'm excited about that as well. So that's the end of Colossus. I'm very, very excited. But as excited as I am about Colossus, I'm even more excited about Kitty Pryde. Now, if you know my playstyle, that's probably not surprising to you. I'm not as big of a fan of the bruisers. I know I always say Drax is my favorite, so that doesn't really apply. But beyond Drax, I usually really like the heroes that play in more of a sideways motion rather than straightforward. You know, you have to do sort of kooky things. And I also really love form changers. And Kitty Pryde is a form changer. She's very similar to Vision in that she can be intangible or tangible, though they call them differently here. So let's take a look at her cards. Her alter ego tells you to put the mass form upgrade into play, solid side face up. So exactly like Vision, you're going to have your mass form in play from the start of the game. And then her ability is that you can flip your mass form upgrade once per round. So you can only voluntarily flip her form while you're in alter ego, which is different than how the other ones usually work. And we'll get to why that is here in a second. Her hero form, Shadowcat, is a 2/2/2 stat line. That's always nice to see. Plays very well in solo in that way. And her ability is selective intangibility while you are on phased mass form. Shadowcat ignores the guard and patrol keywords and any crisis icons in play. Now, as excited as I am for Kitty Pryde, I'll be the first to admit that hero ability isn't that exciting. You know, there isn't always going to be guard and patrol keywords, and there isn't always going to be crisis icons in play. And even if there was, the ability to ignore them most of the time isn't that exciting because you usually want to remove them anyway. So her hero ability might make you think, oh, I don't know, that's not a very exciting power, but everything else about her is super great. So, you know, if that's useful once in a while or never, I think her other cards make up for it. So let's look at her mass form upgrades. So we're going to start with the solid side face up, and it tells us that it's a mass form and permanent, and it is a hero resource. Exhaust this card and generate a punch resource for an attack or defense event. So right off the bat, you're starting with an extra resource in play. Always good. That's how Nova is. That's how SBDR is. And it's so exciting. We're seeing these newer cards that they start with resources in play that you can use right from the start. You don't have to spend a card from your hand. That's fantastic. So that's right there. Huge bonus for Kitty. But here's what makes her interesting and fun. After you attack or defend in solid mass form, you can flip this card. Now, it is a response, so you don't have to do it. But if you want to, and you probably will a lot of the time, and the reason you're going to want to go to phased, let's take a look at this one. While she's defending, she cannot take damage. Now, this is similar to Vision's. I think I forgot to mention this when I talked about Vision, but in his intangible form, he takes 2 less damage from every enemy attack. So it's really fun hanging out in the Vision form. He can't choose to defend, but he takes 2 less damage, so it's kind of like he's defending for 2, but he gets to stay ready when he does it, and that applies across all the minions and stuff that are attacking him. Just really cool. Well, hers is stronger in that she doesn't take damage, period, but it has to be while she's defending. So while Vision can ignore, you know, all the little minions that would also be attacking him, she's really only using it against the big hit probably, but that's still just really nice to be able to just not take damage. So you're going to want to be in this form most often probably when you go to the villain phase. So at some point on your turn, you're going to want to have attacked or defended so that you can then flip over to phased form. And that puzzle, flipping back and forth, that's what makes the form changers fun. You know, when do you do it? And just getting that timing right. But I love that they don't just have the words solid and phased on it, you know, to trigger off other cards. They also have other really useful abilities. Now, this one is a forced response. After you attack or defend in phased mass form, you have to flip the card. So if you do defend during the villain phase, then you do have to flip this card over, but that's all right. Then you just have it back for that free resource. And that game of flipping them back and forth is going to be a lot of fun. And then when you go to alter ego, and for whatever reason you need to fix the form that you're in, you can do it there. So let's look at her. She has a lot of really interesting cards. She has the Acute Control 1 cost upgrade. And again, everything's superpower traded, so Def Focus, blah, blah. Now, hero response, after you ignore the guard or patrol keyword on a minion, you exhaust this and you deal 2 damage to that minion. Now, this card seems pretty limited because you have to ignore the guard or patrol keyword on a minion, so all of those things have to be in play. I'm wondering if her Nemesis set might have some of that in there, or maybe there will be a lot of it in the Mutant Genesis campaign anyway. But either way, there's only so much of that in the game. But, you know, it's a 2 damage every single time you do it, so I don't know if this card's going to be a priority to get on the table, maybe in certain scenarios. But another thing to keep in mind is this game is very modular. And as I've often said in the past about heroes like Thor and Valkyrie, people might say, well, they're only good in scenarios with lots of minions. Well, we control what goes in the scenarios to some degree. So if you're playing Kitty Pryde and you want to have more fun, you throw the Symbiotic Strength modular in there with the patrol and keyword symbiote enemies, or, you know, some of the other modulars that might have more of that stuff in there, and then you're going to get to use her powers more. And I think that makes so much sense from a story perspective. If you're writing a story about Kitty Pryde, she's going to have things in the story that she particularly likes to deal with, and we can do that in the game as well. So still not that exciting of a card, but I'm just saying, like, there are ways to make it better. Now, Intangible Interference is somewhat similar, 1 cost upgrade. After you ignore the crisis icon on a scheme, I think these are a little more common. I think every scenario probably has at least 1 crisis, so I think you'll be able to get more use out of this. You exhaust this to remove 2 threat from that scheme. So it's basically 2 free damage or 2 free thwarting, but in, you know, a limited capacity. This card's really great. 2 cost event Shadowcat Surprise. Hero action attack, deal 3 damage to an enemy and ready your hero. Now 3 damage for 2 isn't very good, but you're also getting to ready your hero. So it's 3 damage for 2 and then 2 thwart or 2 more attack. So it's definitely a decent card. And remember that for the most part, every card that we see is going to cost 1 less because you're going to have Def Focus on the table helping to pay for these. We see Phase Strike, a 3 cost event. It's another attack action. You get to deal 6 damage to an enemy for 3. That's, you know, so-so. And then if you're in Phase Mass form, you can discard an attachment with a text hero action or hero response from that enemy. I don't want to keep comparing her to Vision, but their powers are very similar. So she does the same thing that he has with his card, where he takes one of those attachments off the villain. In his case, he also confuses the villain. In this case, she does 6 damage, so a little bit more aggressive for Kitty here. And she has a 0 cost event, Quick Shift. It is her defense card. When an enemy attacks, if you're in solid mass form, it allows you to change to your phased mass form. So what that means is now you're defending because you played a defense traded card, and you don't take damage because you're in phased form. You don't have to exhaust to defend, and you won't take damage. So that's a really, really cool card. But if you're already in phased mass form, you get to draw 2 cards. So just really good all around. That's going to be a fun card to have in your hand. And then a 3 cost upgrade, Phased and Confused. Hero form only, attached to an enemy, max 1 per enemy. When an attached enemy would attack, you could discard this card instead and then confuse that enemy. So this is very similar to Spider-Man's Webbed Up card. That one cost 4 and prevented the attack and stunned the villain. This one prevents the attack and then confuses them. And I'm not going to go on and on about how much I love Confused, but I love Confused, so I'm happy to see that. So now we look at her deck building card. She comes in Aggression. First off, we have a 3 cost ally Magic, so Colossus' sister. So she has 1 thwart, 2 attack, 3 health. And after you play her from your hand, if you spend a mental resource, so an extra one, so you're paying 4 at this point, you get to choose a non-elite minion, engage with an X-Men hero, and shuffle it back into the encounter deck. So for 4, you're getting a pretty decent ally, and you can take a minion off the board and shuffle it back into the deck. That seems pretty solid. We see the red training card that gives an attached ally +1 attack and +2 hit points. I think that's going to be really fun to use in Aggression. On perhaps Wolverine, the 4 cost Wolverine ally here, 1 thwart, 3 attack with 2 consequential. His attacks are piercing, always nice to see. But after his turn begins, you get to heal 1 damage from him. So you attack for 3, he takes 2 damage. And then the next turn, he's going to heal 1, so you can attack for 3 again. Now he's got 3 damage on him. You might need to wait a turn for him to heal up a little bit, or if you put the attack training on him, that's that much more health he has. This guy is going to be a monster. You're going to see him in every deck, I think, every Aggression deck. And again, you don't have to be an X-Men to play him. So he's just a super solid Aggression ally. I don't hardly ever play any 4 cost Aggression allies, but I definitely see myself playing Wolverine. Gatekeeper is a very interesting card, a 0 cost upgrade. You attach it to a minion. It gives the minion +2 hit points and patrol, so that's something Kitty likes to see. She can ignore that or get bonuses with her acute control here. And it says when an attached minion is defeated, you get to remove 4 threat from the main scheme. So you're removing 4 threat for 0 in Aggression. You gotta jump through a few hoops to do it, but still, Threat removal and aggression, always nice to see. I love when they give an aspect, something that they're not very good at, a way to do it. And it's always this like ridiculous thing you have to do in order just to get a little bit of thwarting and aggression, but I think it's fun too. I like that. And here we see Team Strike. This card's going to be huge. 1 cost event. Play only if your identity has the X-Men trait. And you exhaust your hero and any number of X-Men allies. And then you deal X damage among enemies in play, where X is the total attack of the characters you exhaust this way. Now, we've seen cards like this before, where you exhaust a bunch of characters and combine their attack. The nice thing about this one is that you can spread it around however you want. So that's just, you can be perfectly efficient, kill all the minions, and then whatever's left over, put it on the villain. That's really, really cool. I think that card's going to see a lot of play. So the 2 heroes in the box look incredible. I'm super excited to play with them. And then let's look quickly at the scenarios. They didn't show too many cards, and I don't usually like spending too much time thinking about scenarios before I play them anyway. So the first villain in the box is Sabretooth, and he is trying to take out Robert Kelly, and that is a classic X-Men story for sure. And one thing I've noticed, I looked at the main schemes a little bit ago, and his main scheme, the way it works is after you resolve step 1 of the villain phase, so you put 1 threat per player on here, then you're going to deal some damage to Robert Kelly, which is this ally that's going to be in play, and he has 9 health. So every time you put threat on here at the beginning of the villain phase, he's going to take some damage. And if he leaves play, you lose the game. So you don't lose when this thing threats out. There is no amount of threat on here. The only thing that matters is if there's at least 6 threat per player on here, Senator Kelly takes more damage. He normally takes 2, but he takes 3 if there's a lot of threat on here. So you still want to keep the threat down, but you don't lose if it gets a lot of threat. That's just it's a different way to do things, so that's pretty cool. There is a side scheme that comes out that says he can't be healed by player card effects, can't have upgrades, so there's nothing you can do to beef up Senator to keep him alive longer. And there's this protect the Senator environment that allows you to actually get some benefits from defending Robert Kelly. So this one looks like a lot of fun. I'm guessing it'll be fun just because the first scenario in a campaign box is always fun. And then we move into a Sentinel scenario, which again, classic X-Men, they're definitely hitting all the high notes. So you're going to be fighting these Sentinels. We see the main villain here is just Ass Sentinel. 2 scheme, 2 attack. He comes in with a tough and 16 hit points. And when he's revealed, you're going to find a card called Abduction Protocols and reveal it. And what this says is a side scheme that the player defeats a scheme, takes 1 random set aside captive ally and puts it into play under their control. So similar to the Taskmaster scenario, you get to go get free allies, which is fun. Now, in this case, they're not free. You get to put it into play with Abduction Protocols, but they do actually have a cost. We see here an example, Boom Boom, 2 cost ally, 1 thwart, 1 attack. And her ability is really fun. After she attacks an enemy, you put a bomb counter on it, and at the end of the player phase, remove all bomb counters from play and deal 2 damage to each enemy for each bomb counter removed from it this way. So on the surface, she's only putting out 1 bomb a turn, but I suppose if you can ready her in different ways, you could throw out more bombs, and at the end of the turn, they all explode. That's just, the theme is incredible. And we see again here, the main scheme, you don't lose by some sort of threat number. It's actually a permanent scheme, and after threat is placed here, if there's at least 5 per hero, the first player places the top card of their deck face down under Operation Zero Tolerance, then you remove 5 threat from the scheme. So if this accumulates too much threat, you're going to have to put cards from your own deck here. So that sounds similar to what the Collector was doing. Hopefully this is more fun to play against than that. We see a Jubilee is one of the allies they revealed. She is a 0 cost, and Cannonball is a 2 cost. So I'm guessing, you get to put them in play for free with the side scheme, but then, they're going to end up in your discard pile, and then when you draw them again, or maybe you get to keep them for later in the campaign, you are going to have to pay their cost to bring them into play. It's slightly more balanced than the ones from the Taskmaster scenario. And then we see Operation Zero Tolerance side scheme. After an enemy attacks and defeats an ally, place that ally face down under the scheme. So the Sentinels are just grabbing cards left and right. They're kidnapping people. And if there are X face down cards under this scheme, the players lose the game. So here we see a loss condition. So again, that one sounds fun. Haven't played it, so can't talk too much about it. We're going to stay with the Sentinel theme, fighting against Master Mold, the one who makes all the Sentinels. He's a 1 scheme, 2 attack. He has Stalwart, Boo, and Toughness. And it says, when Master Mold schemes against you, discard cards from the encounter deck until a Sentinel minion is discarded, put it into play, engage with you, and you don't give him a boost card for this activation. Interesting. So you flip down, and he's only going to scheme for 1, but then he's going to spit out a Sentinel minion, and then, that thing's going to scheme. So you are still getting some extra threat. That's a pretty interesting and different way to do a villain. We see here the main scheme, or at least the first one, has 6 threat per player. Each Sentinel minion gains guards. So you're going to have to kill the Sentinels. And when revealed, you just put his cards. So you're going to have a lot of Sentinel minions in front of you. That'll be fun for the heroes that like to kill a lot of minions. We see an upgrade that goes on the Sentinels, makes them harder to kill. Stun Beam makes them stronger. And we see a couple examples of the Sentinel minions. One scheme, 2 attack, 2 health. And this one either surges or goes and finds a side scheme. This one has quick strike and 6 health. And so that you can see that these sentinels all just really work together in fun ways. I think this one's going to be a blast. I always really like the scenarios that have a lot of small minions, Drang, Ultron, Green Goblin, just a lot of fun. The fourth scenario is the Mansion Attack. Looks like it's going to be a multi-villain scenario with Toad, Pyro, Blob, and Avalanche. Kind of the losers of the Brotherhood of Mutants a little bit, so it makes sense that there's all 4 of them. These guys get beat up on all the time. And so they all have abilities. When they attack you, they do different things. So somewhat similar to the Sinister Six, though I have no doubt that it'll play very differently. We see here the main scheme, the Brotherhood Strikes. When revealed, deal each player face on a counter card. Advance to the next card in the main scheme deck. Add this card to the victory display. Okay, that sounds interesting. We have a Save the School environment. After the villain is defeated, if there are X villains in the victory display, the players win the game. Okay, so you have to knock out a certain number of the Brotherhood here. Otherwise, you deal everybody an encounter card and get the next villain. So that'll be cool. We see the scheme 2B. The atrium, each character gains steady, and you add this to the victory display. Advance. Okay, so this is starting to remind me, there's a Lord of the Rings scenario where there's a whole bunch of different main schemes, and you're working your way through this pile of main schemes trying to find the certain one to win. I'm not saying this is exactly the same, but it gives me that flavor, and that's really cool to see, you know, them taking design ideas from other games even and finding ways to incorporate them into this one. I'm not going to read all these. It looks like there's quite a few, but you're going to be finding all these different main schemes, and it looks like if you lose too many of them, the players lose the game, so you have to be careful not to let them go. I'm excited. And finally, of course, Magneto would be the main villain. He looks pretty tough. If he's anything like all the other scenario boxes, he will be the hardest one, and he'll probably be just pretty tough in his own right, period. He has steady and toughness in his first form. I think almost every one of the villains in this already has toughness, so that seems to be a common thread. After he attacks you, you're going to put a magnet counter on the main scheme, and then kind of similar to Zola, if there are at least 3 magnet counters, you're going to do a thing. In this case, you're discarding cards until a magnetic card is discarded and revealing it. So it's actually very similar to Zola. Instead of getting a minion, you're just getting a magnetic card. So he's going to be getting powered up every 3 counters, and he gets the counters from attacking you. Okay. And then it spits out these different various abilities. We see he has some upgrades. He might give you a treachery. So there's all kinds of different things that could give you, but basically an extra encounter card every 3 times he attacks you. And they look pretty nasty. Exhaust each upgrade and support you control, and it puts a magnet counter back on the main scheme. So it looks like it can build up even faster. You see wrapped in metal here. It goes onto your identity. You can't thwart, attack, defend, or recover. Yuck. And you have to exhaust your identity and spend a punch resource to discard it. At least it's not an alter ego action, so it's not that bad, but still kind of annoying. A whole bunch of spoilery pictures for the rulebook that I'm not going to read, but if you want to look at them, they are on Hall of Heroes. So that's the Mutant Genesis box. Looks so cool. Let's keep on going. So as I previously mentioned, they also announced that Cyclops and Phoenix would also be coming out on day 1 with Mutant Genesis. There will be 4 X-Men to play right from day 1, and then there will be 4 more in the cycle as normal. So you'll have 8 X-Men by the end of the cycle. And they also said there's going to be at least 2 cycles of X-Men. I can't remember exactly how they worded it, but they strongly hinted that there would be at least 2 cycles worth of X-Men. So you're going to be getting a lot of mutants, but you're going to be getting 4 on the first day. And I'll tell you now, this is the one I'm the most excited about, so let's dig into Cyclops. Not only am I a huge fan of the character, I'm just a huge fan of the style that he's bringing to the game. So in his alter ego form, it says you may include X-Men allies from any aspect in your deck. You know, we typically see one hero in every cycle that allows you to break the deck building restrictions. We had Spider-Woman kind of early on in the game, and then Gamora could do it, and then Adam Warlock, and now Scott Summers can have all the X-Men. So every single time they come out with a new X-Men ally, he can just always have the best ones in his deck every time. So of course that's going to want to make you focus on allies, but it's not the only way to play him. And his ability is to search your deck for a tactic upgrade and add it to your hand. And I think this alter ego ability is incredible, because it also is another one of those that's going to have like basically a 7 starting hand size in alter ego when he starts the game, but he's pretty much always going to have a 7 hand size in alter ego, because as long as you have tactic upgrades in your deck, you're going to be able to go get one every time. And he's got quite a few in his deck, and then there are other deck building cards that you can use to put in his deck that you're probably going to want to, so that you can search for them. I think it's going to be huge to go to alter ego with Cyclops. You're going to want to be hunting up these tactic upgrades. And it's nice that they're upgrades and not events, because you'll still be able to play them in alter ego form. So you can go search for it and then put it into play. I think his alter ego ability is one of the best we've seen in the entire game. You're going to want to pack his deck full of Confuse. You're going to want to be able to flip down. It's going to be so awesome. So we see in his hero form, 2 thwart, 1 attack, 2 defense. And his ability is Optic Blast. It's an attack action that you spend a resource of any type and you deal 3 damage to an enemy with an upgrade attached. So you've got on demand 3 damage by spending a resource of any type, but they do have to have some kind of upgrade attached. Thankfully, he has a ton of them in his deck. So we'll take a look at these. The 1 cost upgrade, Exploit Weakness. You attach to an enemy. It is the temporary keyword, which is new, and that means it goes away at the end of the either player phase or round. I'm not sure, but it only lasts for the 1 turn, basically. And it increases the amount of damage attached enemy takes from each attack by 1. Now in solo, that's only going to be so-so, but in multiplayer, it's going to be amazing. So you're definitely going to want to put this on the villain, and this is just going to take a ton of extra damage. But either way, just having any upgrade on an enemy means he can trigger his Optic Blast, so they're always going to be useful in that way. But that one seems really good. He has a 0 cost upgrade, Practice Defense, that goes on an enemy. It has temporary, and it gives the enemy -1 attack. That one's, I think, a little bit less exciting, but it's only 0 cost and it's going to let you do other things, so it's still nice to have. Priority Target is kind of the one I'm most excited about. 0 cost, attached to an enemy, temporary, like we've seen. And when an attached enemy is defeated, the player who defeated it draws 2 cards. So you're spending a card, but then you're getting 2 back, plus anything else that triggers off of having upgrades on enemies. So that one is going to be a lot of fun. I'm hoping there's at least 2 of those in the deck. That'll be nice. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be Cyclops who defeats it. It gets to draw the card, so that could be fun in multiplayer as well. 1 cost upgrade, Field Commander. This card is going to be huge for him. You take the first turn during the player phase, which is just really interesting. Cyclops will always be the first player once you get this done, and then the turn order continues how it would have normally been from there. He doesn't get to take 2 turns or anything like that, but you want him to be first because you want him to be putting these upgrades out there, and then if you're playing multiplayer, other people could also take advantage of them. That's a really, really cool idea. Plus, he is just the consummate leader. He is always in charge. He always knows what to do. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Cyclops. So I really like that he tapped into his very obvious, leadership characteristics. And then the ability on the card, in addition, is each Cyclops upgrade attached to a minion loses the temporary keyword. So some of these get a little bit more interesting. Like this Practice Defense, you could throw it on a minion if you wanted to and give it -1 attack and then just ignore it, for example, because it's no longer temporary. It can just hang out until you get around to making use of it. Because sometimes you might put one of these on an enemy and then maybe not get a lot of use out of it by the end of the phase. This way, at least the ones on minions get to stick around. And then his sort of obligatory weapony upgrade, 2 cost upgrade for the Ruby Quartz Visor. It is a resource. Exhaust it and generate a lightning resource for your Optic Blast ability. So you're always going to have the resource necessary to pay for this. And it gives it piercing and range. So just a nice little added benefit there. I don't know that this card will be as crucial to get on the table as some other big hero weapon upgrades, but maybe. We'll have to see how he plays. And we see the 1 cost event, Full Blast. When you use your Optic Blast ability, Exhaust Cyclops, this attack deals 8 additional damage and gains Overkill. Now that sounds like a lot, and it is, and it's only 1 cost event, but you have to be exhausting Cyclops. You have to be paying for the Optic Blast ability. So it costs 1, but then there are some, additional costs, 1 more resource or exhaust your visor. But then you get, 8 additional damage and Overkill. So that's 11 damage because it already does 3 as Overkill. And then if you are using the Ruby Quartz Visor to pay for it, also has piercing and ranged. So I do like that his Optic Blast is among the most powerful attacks in the game where you're going to do 11 damage with piercing, ranged, and Overkill. That feels appropriate to Cyclops and makes me very happy. When he unleashes that thing, it's a sight to behold. And he has the 2 cost event, Tactical Brilliance. This is his thwart card. You get to remove 3 threat from a scheme, and then you choose a tactic card in your discard pile and add it to your hand. So it's only 3 threat for 2, but then you're getting a card back. So, and a lot of the cards that you would get back are either 0 or 1, so you should be able to play it. So you're just constantly going to be searching up these tactic cards, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Now, it's another hero that's largely relying on minions to be in play, to be at his most effective, but like I already said earlier, that doesn't bother me. You can pack more minions in decks that you're going to play with Cyclops. But even as long as there's, a few here and there, I think he's still going to be able to do plenty of work. Plus, he has the whole can use all the allies thing, so you'll be able to play all the cool allies. So this is my most anticipated X-Man now. Everything we've seen looks super fun and right up my alley. I like all this combo stuff a lot. So he is coming as a leadership hero, though he can have different colored allies. So we're going to have a few of those. We see Beast here, a 4 cost ally, 2 thwart, 2 attack with only 3 health. But his ability is when he enters play, you get to search your deck and discard pile for a resource card and add it to your hand. So it costs 4, but you can go get one of your double resources, or if there's like a specialty resource. Like I'm really looking forward to playing him with Ironheart because he can go search for a Stroke of Genius to play again. So any heroes that have extra resource cards, Connection to the World Mind comes to mind. So I think Beast is going to be really, really useful in a lot of decks. Again, I'm so happy to be seeing these X-Men characters that aren't trait locked to the X-Men. They have really useful abilities that you want to go back and play in the old heroes, because these are big enough characters that they don't have to be confined to one team. It's awesome. Here we see Dust is an interesting character. 1 thwart, 1 attack, and her ability, she's a 3-cost ally with 3 health. When she attacks a minion, she attacks each minion in play, but she takes +1 consequential damage. So she's only going to be able to do that a couple times. But if you can increase her attack with, say, that red training card we saw earlier, she'll be hitting every minion harder. She'll have more health. So it could be really, really useful in certain scenarios. We see here coordinated attack. So here's another tactic card that you could put in Cyclops' deck. Doesn't necessarily just have to be his tactic cards. You can also include them. 0-cost upgrade attaches to a minion, so similar to how his cards already work. And it says that each ally takes -1 consequential damage when attacking attached minions. So it's a way to keep your allies alive longer and trigger Cyclops' abilities. So very cool. Here we see the blue training card, Danger Room Training, attached to an X-Men ally, max 1 per ally, and it gives them +1 thwart, +1 attack, and +1 hit point. So it's a slightly better version of Inspired that's limited to X-Men allies. I'm going to go out of order a little bit because I want to talk about Danger Room since we just talked about this one. This is what's going to really make these attachments a big deal and why you're going to want to play with them, because I don't put ally attachments in every deck I build. Even if I'm playing leadership, I don't always use them, but I think you're going to want to with the X-Men just for this Danger Room support here, because it says after an X-Men ally enters play, exhaust the Danger Room. It's a 2-cost support. It says search your deck and discard pile for a training upgrade and attach it to that ally, and anybody who happens to be an alter ego that's a mutant can do it. So even if you don't go to alter ego on a given turn, if you're playing multiplayer and somebody else goes to alter ego, they can make use of the Danger Room. It's another really cool feature we're starting to see on these trait specific upgrades. We saw it with the Champion's Mobile Bunker, that you can exhaust it to let any champion draw 2 and discard 2. So even though only one player can play it, anybody can still use it. We saw it with the Web of Life and Destiny. It works for all the Web Warrior allies that leave play. You don't have to exhaust it. So everybody gets benefits from it, even though it's unique. And it's the same thing here. Even though only one player can play it, anybody can make use of it when they go to alter ego. It is, again, brilliant design. So this really makes these attachments much more attractive, because you're going to be able to keep fetching them out of the deck and discard pile. That's the key there. Like, you can just keep pulling them out of the discard pile. This was a great way to emulate what the Danger Room does, but also make these cards a lot more useful. Obviously, we're going to be wanting to play a lot of X-Men allies in our X-Men deck. They're very team-oriented, and you're going to be well rewarded for doing so. And I'm going to keep going out of order a little bit because Utopia also plays into that. If each of your allies has the X-Men trait, increase your ally limit by 1. And it says, after an X-Men ally enters play, you get to exhaust this and ready an X-Men character. Now, there is a little bit of anti-synergy with these cards because you have to do the alter ego thing to get the Danger Room benefit, but most of the mutants, I think maybe all of them we've seen so far, are not an X-Men character. In their hero form, they're a mutant. So say you're an alter ego and you want to play an X-Men ally so that you can do this to go get the training upgrade and stuff. You're not going to be able to ready your hero because you're not going to be in hero form, because you have to be alter ego to use the Danger Room. Now, they're both really good cards that you're probably going to put in most of your X-Men decks, but it's a little unfortunate that they don't necessarily work super well together in solo. Now, you could just use this ability to ready one of your X-Men allies. It does not necessarily have to be your hero. So, for example, you could attack with Wolverine, then play an X-Men and exhaust the Danger Room to go put upgrade on it, and then just use Utopia to ready Wolverine. So it still works fine. I'm not saying it's not a combo at all. It's just not often going to work to ready your hero in solo play, but not a big deal. It's just something I noticed. Now, a couple more leadership cards here, and I forgot to mention leadership is my favorite aspect, so I was already more excited about these to begin with. We see a resource card that maybe Beast will go get. It's max 2 per deck, effective leadership. When you spend this card to play an ally, that ally gets +1 Thor and +1 attack until the end of the phase. So here's another potential combo here. So you're going to use this to play an ally, and then it's going to get a little bit of a boost. And if you have ways to ready allies, like say Utopia, then you might be able to get more than one use out of that. Now, I don't often personally put resource cards in my deck that only provide 1, but this benefit might be worthwhile. We'll just have to see. I'm not real sure about this card, but it's certainly a neat concept, and I love that they're making resource cards with special abilities. That makes them more interesting, and it's wild, so that's nice too. It's not tied to X-Men at all. Nova could make use of this, for example, as a wild resource, so there are definitely going to be uses for this card. And then here we see a reprint of the Teamwork card that I've always thought was just okay, but we get the X-Men artwork on it. It's cool to see armor in a card. I wonder if we'll see her as a character at some point. But if you're not familiar with the card, when you use your basic thwart or basic attack, you can exhaust an ally, and then you add their stats to yours. So it's basically a way to use an ally, without taking a consequential damage. And there might be some other combo uses for it that well. I think the card's just okay, but we might see some more play from it. And then here's a bunch of extra spoilery cards that I don't want to look at. I'm just going to kind of skip past. So there's Cyclops. Could not be more excited. He looks really awesome. And he is coming out on the same day as the Phoenix, who looks incredibly interesting. So here we see Jean Grey in her Phoenix form, and her setup ability is to put your Phoenix Force upgrade into play, yet another double-sided upgrade card that starts the game that sort of controls how the character works. And it says that after you make a basic recovery, you can place 1 power counter on Phoenix Force. We'll talk about why you care about those here in a second. In her hero form, she has 3 thwart, which is the first time we've ever seen that, 1 attack and 2 defense. And her ability is a resource, remove 1 power counter from the Phoenix Force to generate a wild resource. And we saw that when she recovers, you put a counter on it. So you can spend these counters as resources, but only once per phase. So it's kind of similar to the Toon counters from Spider-Ham, but you can only use them once per phase. So let's look at this Phoenix Force. We have the restrained side and the unleashed side. So when it's restrained, you gain the restrained trait, and after the last power counter is removed from here, flip this card. Now, she starts the game with 4 counters on here, and you can spend 1 per turn as a resource. So basically, you could spend 1 every turn for 4 turns, and then it would flip over. And when it flips over, you become unleashed. You get -2 thwart and +2 attack. So now you're only thwarting for 1, attacking for 3. And after a power counter is placed here, if there are 4 or more, you flip it. So you basically remove them from this one, and then you're going to be building them back up. But whichever side you're on, you can still spend them as a resource. They're both just called Phoenix Force. So either way, if there's counters, you can spend them as a resource. And so why do we care if we are restrained or unleashed? Well, let's look at our cards. All right, I couldn't avoid this spoiler. I didn't know that they'd shown the Cyclops ally, so this wasn't in the article, I don't think, but we'll take a look at him. 3 cost ally, 2 thwart, 2 attack, 3 health. After he enters play, you're going to put 2 power counters on Phoenix Force, so he's putting 2 back on. And when he leaves play, you remove 2. Okay, so sort of a loan, I guess. Now we see her support here, 2 cost White Hot Room. It's an alter ego action. You exhaust it to either place a power counter on Phoenix or to heal 2 damage from Jean Grey. So you're going to be playing this balancing game of either adding counters or removing them. And there's various ways to do both. The Phoenix suit, 2 cost upgrade, gives her aerial. While you are restrained, you gain steady. While you're unleashed, you gain retaliate 1. I know I compare cards all the time, but it's similar to Vision's Cape, depending on which version you are. You get a different benefit. Steady is always nice. Retaliate 1 is always nice. So either way, it's good. But unlike the other, she's not a form changer. I want to be clear. Like, you're going to be basically one or the other for a while. Like, you're going to be restrained probably for a little while. And then once you're unleashed, you might be unleashed for the rest of the game. This isn't like Vision or Kitty or Spectrum where you're going to be jumping around forms all the time. You're going to be sort of in one for a little while, and then you might go to the other for a little while, that kind of thing. So she definitely is different in that way. So now we're going to start seeing why we care about which form we're in. The Psychic Blast, 2 cost event. The hero action, deal 4 damage to the villain. If you have the Unleashed trait, deal 4 damage to each minion engaged with you. So if you're restrained, it's simply 4 damage for 2 to the villain only. It's okay. But if you're Unleashed, it deals 4 damage to each minion as well. That seems a little better. We see Telepathic Trickery, 2 cost event. It's her thwart, remove 4 threat from a scheme. If you have the Unleashed trait, stun and confuse an enemy. Again, way better if you're Unleashed. The Phoenix Firebird here, 1 cost event. You get to choose, remove 1 power counter from Phoenix Force to ready the Phoenix, or place 2 power counters on Phoenix Force, so another one of those cards that lets you play that balancing act, depending on where you want it to go. We see here a 4 cost upgrade, very expensive, but it's pretty cool, Mind Control. You put it on minion, and then you get to take control of attached minion, and basically it becomes an ally. So 4 is a lot, but you're removing a minion from play and gaining an ally. So this is an incredibly good card, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. Now, it doesn't work on the elite minions, so you can't take Rhino or any of the biggest, scariest ones, but there's still some beefy non-elite minions out there that could be really good targets for this. She has a 2 cost upgrade, Telekinetic Shield, that you can put on a friendly character, so her, one of your allies, another player. When attached character would take damage from an enemy attack, so it is limited to attacks, place that damage here instead. Then if there's at least 5 damage here, discard Telekinetic Shield. We've seen the villains have cards like this where it'll eat a bunch of damage. And what's cool is you don't check for the damage till after. So you could take an 8 damage attack, for example, and then you check to see if the damage is there, and then you discard it. So if you maybe prevented a 4 damage attack once, then you'd still get the whole next attack before it's discarded. So that's going to be really, really nice. And then we see our 3 cost upgrade, Rise from the Ashes, you know, the whole Phoenix thing. When you would be defeated, remove this card from the game, ready your identity, and restore it to its printed hit point value instead. And then you remove each power counter from Phoenix Force. So you basically get a whole nother set of hit points but you're removing all the counters, so you're going straight to Unleashed. Now, why do we care about being Unleashed? I don't always talk about these, but the big thing about Phoenix is her obligation and her nemesis set. So her obligation says, when revealed, if you have the Unleashed trait, search the encounter deck discard pile and set aside area for Dark Phoenix and reveal her. So if you're Unleashed when this comes out, you're going to go find the Dark Phoenix. But if you're restrained, you simply lose a power counter and this card surges. So if you've managed to hold on to your counters, you're going to lose one. Every time this comes out, you're going to tick a little bit closer to being Unleashed. But if you are Unleashed, it brings out the Dark Phoenix. So let's talk about her. She is a minion, Cosmic Entity, Elite, 2 scheme, 2 attack, 12 hit points, steady, toughness, villainous, so all the things. When she schemes, she's going to place that threat on this side scheme. We'll talk about that instead, and then search the encounter deck discard pile and set aside area for it. So when she comes out, you also get this Consume the World side scheme. It's permanent and it has an amplify, but if there's no threat on it, then it loses the amplify. So you can't get rid of it, but you can at least reduce what it's doing to you. But if it ever gets to 12 threat, you just lose. So by the Dark Phoenix coming out, you instantly introduce a new loss condition into the game. So that's pretty cool. And it definitely steps up the whole Nemesis element quite a bit from the other heroes. You know, every other hero, the Nemesis comes out, no big deal. This Nemesis could cause you to lose the game. And I also love the concept that you're just trying to stop Rhino from stealing some vibranium, and then suddenly the whole world gets eaten. So that's fun. So that's the whole thing with the Restrained and Unleashed. The only reason you care about being Unleashed, near as I can tell, is the chance that your obligation could come out and then you get the Dark Phoenix. For me, that's a chance I'm willing to take. All of her cards are better when you are Unleashed. The only one that gives you any reason to want to be Restrained is the Phoenix suit if you would rather have Steady than Retaliate. Other than that, all of her cards work better when you're Unleashed. So I say go for it. I say get to Unleashed as fast as you can, especially if you've already seen your obligation. Obviously, that makes it a little more safe, and Shadows of the Past could bring out the Dark Phoenix anyway. So I don't think there's that much risk. Now, we haven't seen all of her cards, and maybe I'm just wrong, but it seems to me that you might as well spend those counters, use those resources up, get to Unleashed, make her cards better. Now, the other difference is she goes from 3 thwart to 3 attack, so you really might care about that. Having a 3 thwart hero can really keep the game in check. Then once you drop to 1 thwart, you're going to be in attack mode. So, but I think the timing of it's going to work out fine. You're going to have your 3 thwart early in the game while you're using up those counters, and then you get Unleashed and you have 3 attack and you go nuts. So that seems to me the way you're going to play her. I think she looks really, really cool. I just wonder if there's not really a good enough reason to want to stay Restrained that doesn't make the whole thing matter that much, if you know what I mean. Now let's look at her deck building cards. She comes as Justice, so we'll see all 4 of the aspects represented on day 1. She has the 4-cost Banshee ally. After he thwarts, you get to confuse a minion. That one's just okay. Marvel Girl is really cool, where she thwarts for 2, attacks for 1. She's a 3-cost. When she attacks a minion, you remove X threat from the main scheme, where X is that minion's printed scheme. So she's going to deal a little damage to a minion. Now it's only 1, but still, then you're going to remove threat from the scheme. So we've seen allies like this before that are going to deal damage and remove threat, but depending on the minion that you're targeting, you could potentially remove a decent amount of threat. Plus, the theme is just fun that she's mind controlling the minion to work against the villain. That's fun. Here we see the Justice training card that gives an attached ally +1 thwart and +2 hit points. There actually isn't very many ways to increase allies' thwart in the game, so that's pretty nice to see. And the extra health is always going to be welcome. We see the X-Men version of Swift Retribution with some Gambit art that's going to make people happy. The card itself is okay. The villain schemes, deal 4 damage to the villain, so it's 4 damage for 1 in Justice, but it does allow the villain to scheme. Now we're seeing a lot more confused in the game by the time this box comes out, so maybe if the villain's confused, it's worthwhile. This Psychic Manipulation card is fascinating. Play only if your identity has the psionic trait. So Jean does, but I think that's the only hero we've seen so far, though there's so many mind control-y people in the X-Men. I'm sure we'll see others. Emma Frost immediately comes to mind, and Professor X himself. And the ability is when the villain schemes, this activation removes threat instead of placing it. So it's a 3-cost event, and it's not a hero action, so obviously you can use it in Alter Ego when they scheme, but instead of adding threat, they're going to remove threat. Now it is an interrupt, it says when, so you don't know how much they're going to scheme for you. You haven't seen the boost card yet, outside of shenanigans. So you don't know quite how much threat it's going to remove, but instead of getting any threat, you're removing some. So that still seems pretty good for 3. We see Mutant Peacekeepers here as a 1-cost thwarting event. You have to be an X-Men to play it. And the hero action is to exhaust your hero and any number of X-Men allies, remove X threat from among schemes in play. where X is a total thwart of those characters. So it's the exact same thing as that team up attack we saw for red, but again, it's just really nice to spread around your thwart in the most efficient way possible. And then we see a huge card, 1-cost support, Cerebro. Play only if your identity has the mutant trait, which all the X-Men have in their alter ego form. And as an alter ego action, exhaust it, search the top 5 cards of your deck for an X-Men ally. Search your whole deck instead if you control a psionic character and add that ally to your hand. Now that control a psionic character is a very key phrase. You don't have to be a psionic hero to get this benefit. You just have to have a psionic character on the table. So if you are a psionic hero, great. But there's going to be plenty of allies with a psionic trait that can help facilitate this. And so when you're in alter ego, you can simply use this to go get an X-Men ally. And then you can play it, use the Danger Room to slap a Danger Room training card on it, and then use Utopia to ready somebody. That is going to be a really fun loop that you're going to see in a lot of X-Men decks. Obviously, Cyclops loves this, but I think you're just going to see the whole X-Men ally thing. They're really pushing that where they all just want to play together. They play well together, and you're going to be using these in most of your X-Men decks, I think. So I'm very excited for all the iconic Utopia, Cerebro, Danger Room, obviously very iconic X-Men locations, and they are so well represented in the game. So like I said, Jean Grey looks really interesting. I don't know how much it's going to matter if you get yourself unleashed. It might not be that interesting of a choice or not. We'll just have to see, but either way, I'm really excited to play her. After Phoenix was announced, they gave us quite the curveball with the Mojo Mania Scenario Pack announcement. As I said before, I'm a huge X-Men fan, so I was very excited to see anything they showed us, but I'm also a big Mojo fan, so this was very welcome. There are so many iconic X-Men villains, and they got to find a way to get them into the game fast, because clearly they want a big X-Men push here. And so getting a scenario pack right off the bat makes perfect sense, and Mojo is kind of an oddball, so it works out. The scenario packs do tend to be a little weirder mechanism-wise, but also, the content they come with is a little bit different than your typical campaign box. And so seeing what they're doing with Mojo has me very happy. Basically, there are 3 scenarios, and I don't want to spend too much time on them all. They actually showed quite a few cards, and there's some really good previews out there, so I'm just going to go through this quickly. But I did want to talk about it. We have Magog here, which is sort of one of Mojo's goons. His whole thing is he has a TV channel that people watch like all across the galaxy, and he's always trying to provide the best entertainment, and he thinks the X-Men make excellent characters on his shows, so he's kidnapped some X-Men and he's forced them into playing on his different TV shows. So he has a sort of an arena challenge where you have to fight Magog here, and you want to become the champion. So it's less about defeating Magog with hit points and more about getting these ratings counters. You have a cheering crowd card and a booing crowd. Like, it's completely different than, say, going into hell and defeating Hela. We're just trying to please the crowd. I love how different it is. Mojo always has sort of a goofy, whimsical flavor, and that clearly seems to be playing well. The scenario looks really cool. Like, so I'm not going to go over the cards because there's a lot of them, and you can see them elsewhere, but it does look like a really fun scenario. And then the second one is we see Spiral, sort of his right-hand lady, one of his main lieutenants, and her whole thing, as you're chasing her, she's going to be teleporting away. And so that's going to play very differently. There's like a deck of cards that you'll be shuffling that you're trying to find her in or something like that. Like I said, I don't pay too close attention to the villains before I play them, so I don't know exactly how it works, but I know it looks really cool. And then finally, we have the Mojo scenario himself, where you finally do have to defeat him. But you're going to be going through different shows, and so there's different themes for the TV shows that he makes that are clearly based on certain things we've seen before. A game of Mojos. We see an interestingly shaped throne here, if you know what I'm saying. Then we see a crime scene investigation with, if you look at the letters of that card, Law and Order fetch quest. I mean, they're not even really trying to pretend what they're doing, but the fetch quest is particularly funny, I think. But so we see some like fantasy themes. So depending on what show you end up in, you'll fight different people and stuff like that. I don't know exactly how it works, but it looks cool. And then the other thing that they showed is this 1-card modular encounter set for Longshot. When they first announced Mojo, my hope, before I knew anything about the pack, was that there would be a Longshot hero in that pack. Now, I know they never put a hero pack in a scenario pack before, but like I said, every scenario pack is different. Kang is completely different from Green Goblin, completely different from the Hood. And Longshot is really a hero you only ever see when you're doing Mojo stuff. So he didn't get a hero, but he does get this interesting, he's a modular encounter set. You actually put him in the villain deck, the encounter deck, and then he might just pop out and join you. He doesn't count against your ally limit. He's a 2/2 ally with 3 health, and you just get him for free. Now he does surge because, of course, he's going to surge. But still, you can play this in every deck. Like, I'm literally going to put him in my standard encounter set, and I'm never not playing with Longshot ever again. We don't ever get cards that make the encounter deck easier. And so this is just fascinating. This is a way to slightly make the game easier. Now, maybe you won't see him. He doesn't have boost ability, so he's just going to get discarded as a 0 boost if that's how he gets dealt. But still, it's just such a neat idea. And his whole ability is based around luck anyway. And so you just have to get lucky for him to pop out at the right time. I love this idea, and I could not be more pleased. And like I said, I'm pretty sure I will always be playing with Longshot forever and always. And then the most recent thing they've shown as of this recording was the Wolverine Hero Pack. And I'm pretty sure this shot straight to the top of everybody's most anticipated list. For me, he still takes a slight backseat to Cyclops, but not by much. He looks incredible. And he had to, right? It's Wolverine. You always have to get Wolverine right. Wolverine is either the most popular or second most popular character in the Marvel Universe. There are so many people who might not know anything about X-Men, but they know who Wolverine is. He was exceptionally well represented in the movies, and we know that they're going to have to start doing some serious casting to get it right when the new Disney X-Men movies start coming out. So Wolverine is a big, big deal. And I'm very happy that they completely nailed him. He looks like an amazingly fun hero to play. So let's go through his cards. Here we see Logan with a 6 recovery, which should come as no surprise. His healing factor is incredibly strong. He has regenerated from being cut in half, from having his head blown off by the Punisher, from flying into the sun. He always comes back. So 6 recovery is a decent way to reflect that. And his ability is that you search your deck and discard pile for the Wolverine's Claws upgrade and put it into play. And then this is a permanent upgrade that we'll talk about in a second. There's a whole controversy about why that's shuffled into the deck. Should it just start and play? I'm not going to get into any of that, but just know that you're meant to search for it and put it into play, or you can just start with it and play. Do whatever you want. So the Wolverine Hero, he's a 2/2/2, which makes me very happy as a mainly solo player. I love seeing heroes with 2 thwart. And his ability is Healing Factor Response. After the player phase begins, heal 2 damage. That doesn't sound like much. I think that's going to be hugely beneficial. Just the passive healing of 2 damage every turn makes a huge difference. Now, he only has 10 hit points, but you're going to be spending your health on things besides just getting attacked. So you're going to need that extra 2 health, but it's such a simple, easy way to reflect his power, and it's just really well done. So let's look at these claws. You're going to have them from the start of the game and forever. And it says that you can exhaust them to choose an attack event in your hand and take damage equal to its cost. So instead of paying resources, you just pay hit points. And then you play it, ignoring its cost. Then it gains piercing. So you could chuck an uppercut, and instead of paying 3 resources, you pay 3 health, and then you deal 5 damage with piercing. Now you have to exhaust it, so you want to do that once a turn. But that is an incredibly powerful ability. And we'll talk about, he has this one huge attack card. You're going to be able to play it on the first turn, no problem, just by paying some health. So he is going to rush down villains probably faster even than Star-Lord, which in some ways makes me sad because I don't really like playing that way, but it's going to be hard not to just because it will be fun. So we see a 2-cost upgrade. Adamantium Skeleton gives him 4 more hit points. So now he's up to 14, and he gets +1 attack, and his basic attacks gain piercing. So now his claws give an attack event piercing, and then he's going to be hitting for 3 with piercing. So this guy does not fear tough statuses, which is really nice for your attacky heroes. That can really slow you down. That is not going to be a problem for him. We see some more healing, a 1-cost event, regenerative healing. You either heal 4 damage from your identity. Now, healing hasn't been all that great in this game, but 4 for 1's pretty good. And considering that it's also a resource form, it's more valuable. Or you can discard each stunned and confused status card from your identity. So you can just keep on. He doesn't get slowed down by things like stunned and confused, which is really nice. As a 4-cost upgrade, I Got Better. When you would be defeated by an enemy attack, you instead set your hit point dial to 5, ready, and discard this card. So a lot of heroes have this sort of get out of jail free card. We just saw the Rise from the Ashes with Phoenix, Drax has one, Captain America. So this one is a little pricier than the ones we've seen, but you do get half your health back, and you get to ready, and it gets discarded. It doesn't get removed from the game like I think some of the other ones do. So there are benefits to it, but it's still kind of pricey. Berserker Barrage is a 2-cost attack action. Deal 4 damage to an enemy, and if it defeats that enemy, you can take 2 damage to repeat the ability. So if you have enough health, you could just wipe the board and then hit the villain for 4. It's an incredibly useful card. So good. Then we have a 3-cost event, Slice and Dice. This one's a little bit less exciting, I think. You make the following 2 attacks in order. Deal 3 damage to an enemy, and deal 3 damage to an enemy. So you're doing 6 damage total for 3, which isn't great. Now, the fact that you can split it up is nice, but I don't know. That one's just okay to me. Now, Lunging Strike is ridiculous. It's a 3-cost event, hero action attack, deal 8 damage to an enemy. If you exhausted Wolverine's Claws to play this card, it gets overkill. So you're going to pay 3 life on the first turn to attack the villain for 8, then you're going to attack with Wolverine for 2, And then if you have any of his other attack cards in your hand, you're going to be able to defeat the first stage of a villain on the first turn pretty regularly. If you get a lunging strike in your opening hand, it's just, he's going to be able to kill villains in 2 turns. It's going to be crazy. And his thwarting event is really good too. I remember when I was reading the article originally and we hadn't seen any kind of thwarting from him, I was getting nervous because sometimes the attack heroes that are so focused on attack can't thwart very well, which means they don't play very well in solo. I don't think that's going to be a problem for him. It's a 2-cost event. You get to remove 3 threat from a scheme, and if it removes the last threat from that scheme, draw 2 cards. So that is a really, really good one. I think he's actually going to play super well in Justice. That's the thing I'm most excited to play him in, because he attacks and does damage so well that if you give him enough yellow cards to manage the board, I think he's going to be unstoppable. We see another ally I am incredibly excited for. He is an aggression. No big surprise there. 4-cost Psylocke, 2 thwart, 1 attack, 3 health. She is a psionic, so having her in play would help you with the Cerebro. She comes into play with 2 psionic counters on her, and when she attacks an enemy, you remove 1, confuse that enemy, and deal 1 damage to it. So she does the exact same thing as the Iron Fist ally for protection, except that he stuns and she confuses. And again, we're just seeing so much more confuse in the game, and I couldn't be happier. I love seeing all this confuse. And if I can jump on the Wasp train again for a second, she has this little mental icon. So between her and Professor X, so I seriously think Wasp was the non-mutant who benefited the most from all these X-Men cards, being able to go to Alter Ego and then shuffle these cards back in for Wasp. I'm already building that deck in my head and I'm super excited. Yeah, she looks incredible. For 4, you're going to get 2 confuses and a block out of her, however you want to use her. Really, really good. We see an X-Men themed version of Battle Fury that after you defeat a minion, you can deal damage to your hero and discard it to ready. That card's good in certain scenarios. This is a really interesting card. Precision Strike, 1-cost event. Deal 2 damage to an enemy. If this attack defeats that enemy, heal 2 damage from your hero. Certainly getting some health back in Wolverine is going to be nice, and some other heroes. Now 2 damage and defeating an enemy means you're probably going to have to deal some damage with an earlier attack or just be fighting small minions. So I think this card is just okay, but in the right heroes, it'll be good, and in the right scenarios. See another X-Men themed reprint, Mean Swing. When your hero makes a basic attack, you can exhaust a weapon to get +3 attack. Now you can exhaust the claws, but you're probably going to be using them for an attack event. So I don't know how much synergy that's going to have with Wolverine, but it might be good. And then this Warrior Skill card is a 2-cost upgrade. It comes into play with 3 counters. And when your hero attacks, you can remove a counter from it to deal 1 additional damage with that attack. So your basic attack could be +1 damage, or if you add it to an event, because it simply says attack, it's going to add 1 damage to that. So if it is an event that has multiple instances of damage, like a dive bomb or 1x1 melee, things like that, it's going to add an additional 1 damage to each of those. But if it's an event like Slice and Dice where there are multiple attack actions, then it only will add 1 damage to one of those. But still could be really, really cool in certain combo decks. Here we get a Colossus basic ally. I'm wondering if we'll see a lot of X-Men basic allies similar to the Guardians. He has a 4-cost, pretty pricey, 1 thwart, 3 attack with 2 consequential, only 3 health. But you get to reduce the cost to play him by 1 if your identity has a mutant or X-Men trait. So he's really only cost 3 most of the time when you play him. And he comes into play with a tough, which is just very nice. And normally when allies come into play with tough, I think, okay, so we're a weird tempo, you're going to pay for them, but then they're going to block, and then you can start using them. But the fact that he attacks for 3 with 2 consequential, I think you're just going to eat that tough to attack for 3 on the first turn without taking those 2. So you'll be able to attack for 3 with him 3 times if you want to. So 9 damage for 4, that seems pretty good. And then the main reason you want to play Colossus is actually the fastball special here. We're getting a team up for Colossus and Wolverine. So cool. Everybody wanted this card. And allows you to deal X damage to an enemy where X is the total attack of Colossus and Wolverine, and it gains overkill and piercing. And you'll notice what I didn't say. I didn't say that you have to exhaust Wolverine and Colossus to do this. You simply get to deal damage equal to their attack. So probably at least 6 damage most of the time with overkill and piercing for 1. Just by having them both in play. So in multiplayer, this is going to be nuts, but in solo, even as long as you can either play Wolverine in the Colossus deck or vice versa, this is going to be so worth it. You're only going to have 1, but it's going to be super fun every single time you do it. And they showed that they are still keeping up with the modular encounter sets. We didn't see any in Scott and Jean, so we don't know for sure if they're coming with them. I'm guessing not, because I suspect they do want to try to get a bunch of X-Men cards into the card pool, but maybe they will. We'll see. But either way, I'm glad that these are continuing, and again, they want to get a lot of X-Men cards into the card pool, and that includes villains. So here's a way to get Lady Deathstrike, of course, one of Wolverine's classic villains, and her cards look really nasty. So very excited to find all the ways that they're just going to shove all these X-Men cards into our decks. So everything we've seen so far from the X-Men looks absolutely incredible. You know, I mentioned near the start of this that maybe I was slightly disappointed when we first started seeing these, that they didn't do something, you know, really out there to set the mutants apart. These do just feel like more Marvel Champions heroes, And in my mind, the X-Men are so separated that they should have been different. I'm way over that now. I don't care. Everything looks absolutely awesome. So no complaints whatsoever. Now, as for what's coming next, let's just have a little fun speculation talk here. We're going to get 3 more heroes in this wave. So Storm seems like a given as the next one. That would just be a wild guess, but they could go in a different direction. You know, when they did the beginning of the game, they started with the first hero pack was Captain America, and then they went with Ms. Marvel as the second pack. So kind of an unexpected character, wasn't in the MCU yet. Not that they have to be for this game, but certainly those are the ones people seem to know the best. So they might not go with such an iconic female for the second one. Maybe they'll do something like a Hope or a Pixie even. I highly doubt it. If anything, if it's not Storm, maybe Emma Frost, if they want to go a slightly different direction and save Storm for maybe the next cycle, so they have some major heavy hitters. I mean, there are plenty of super popular X-Men characters, but they also don't want to use up all the best ones right at the start. But I can see Wolverine and Storm hitting right away, and then for the rest of the cycle, maybe we get Rogue and Gambit. Nightcrawler obviously is a big name that's still out there, Jubilee. And then, like I said, it makes it sound like we're getting at least one more cycle. I think the most obvious direction to go there is very likely Apocalypse. I wondered if we might get some kind of Dark Phoenix scenario pack, but since they made Jean Grey the way she is, I don't think we're ever going to see Dark Phoenix as an actual villain in the game. But I would have loved to have seen a campaign based around that whole storyline. You know, they've done it very badly in the movies multiple times now, but it's a really long, involved story. And so they could have easily done a campaign where they first go into space, and then, you know, you meet the Shi'ar, then she deals with the Hellfire Club, and then you have to go on trial, and ultimately you have the whole Dark Phoenix thing. But I doubt we're going to see that. So Apocalypse makes the most sense after that. And so maybe we see an Archangel hero in that box, and certainly a Mr. Sinister villain, maybe some mutates. So looking forward to that. You know, we've got Iceman out there, Beast, Professor X, and those are just, you know, your mainline X-Men. But if they could go with X-Force, where maybe we start seeing characters like Cable, Deadpool, Domino, various things like that. They could go X-Factor Investigations, and we get Jamie and Richter and Strong Guy. There are so many mutant characters. So I'm not surprised that they're doing a couple cycles in a row, and maybe more. They didn't really put a number on it. They just made it sound like it's going to be all mutants all the time for a while. So I think we can expect the next couple years to mostly be X-Men. And then after that, I think the most obvious direction, the things I would have expected to see before we got to the mutants, actually. We still have the Fantastic Four out there, and we still have the Daredevil, Heroes for Hire, Marvel Knight sort of street level characters out there as well. So my prediction is we'll probably get 2 cycles of X-Men, maybe 3, but probably 2. And especially if they do 8 heroes both times, and we have 16 X-Men heroes. And then that should lead us right around to the time when the new Fantastic Four movie will be coming out and the new Daredevil show will be starting up. So I'm guessing we'd be getting a Fantastic Four box where the heroes in the box could be somebody like the Silver Surfer and Crystal. And then of course we get the 4 main team members of the Fantastic Four in the cycle. And then I'm expecting also some kind of Kingpin themed campaign box at some point where the heroes in that box might be someone like Iron Fist and Colleen Wing, or Luke Cage and Misty Knight. And then the 4 heroes in that wave would be Daredevil, of course, that's the one I'm waiting for the most, and then Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, and the Punisher. So what's so nice about this is there is still so much huge content to come. There are still so many iconic characters. You know, we're not even 3 years into this game. We've already seen pretty much everybody from the MCU that's popular, and now we're going into the X-Men, and then we still have a ton to look forward to after that. The Lord of the Rings lasted 10 years of new content, and I don't see why this can't go at least that long. You know, they're going to run out of super popular characters eventually, and then maybe they'll just start doing, you know, alternate versions. You know, we finally get that Planet Hulk version of Hulk. We might get some sort of superior Spider-Man. You know, the most iconic characters have multiple major storylines that they were in that changed their characters fundamentally, so they could just go that direction eventually. There's still so much love to come for this game. So I think that's it. That is everything. The state of the game was already great, and the future of the game looks incredibly bright as well. Again, I want to thank you so much if you stuck with me through this whole series. I know the videos kept getting longer and longer, but I just kept getting more and more excited, and there was just more and more to talk about because the cards just keep getting better and better. Not necessarily even stronger, just better, just more interesting. Just the synergies are incredible. The theme is incredible. So thank you for sticking with me through this whole thing. I would ask if you'd be so kind, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. I've definitely got more plans for the future. Like the videos just to help them get spread around. And I really hope you'll join me next time we get up in game. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.